come. That's a bit of a hard task to fill, especially last gig in the afternoon. I always think that's one of the hardest, straight after lunch and last gig. Thanks for your perseverance. I hope that what I'm about to talk to you about is worth your staying on for the afternoon. As John said, I work for the Wellington-Blayney-Cabonne Strategic Alliance in New South Wales, and I've been to numbers of conferences, as you all have too, and I'm sick to death of hearing people talk about their journeys, so keeping it a little bit light this afternoon. We're going to have a road trip instead of a journey. And it's a little bit quirky, and I've just tried to turn it into something a little bit light for the afternoon, but not detract from the great outcomes that we have achieved actually as an alliance. Some sort of credibility, I suppose, what allows me to stand up here. We've achieved $4.2 million worth of savings and efficiencies in the time that we've been operating as an alliance. And for the small councils that we are, that's not chicken feed. Some of it's actual hard dollars that we've saved, and a lot of it's to do with efficiencies and sharing of expertise and knowledge that we struggle to get in the rural areas, which I'm sure most of the smaller councils do. So who are we? As John said, we're in the central west of New South Wales, about 3.5 hours drive from Sydney. Beautiful area of New South Wales. In 2003, it was originally Wellington and Blayney and Cabonne that came together. They all have common boundaries. And as John said, fundamentally they'll tell you these days that it was a good idea by the then general managers, and it was all very well thought out, but fundamentally they were battling to stave off amalgamation at the time. And strategic alliances in New South Wales popped up sort of all over the place. One of the other large ones that you may have heard of before was the NESAC Alliance, New England Strategic Alliance. And at the time they were seen to be as a viable option, and the state government had a no forced amalgamations mantra at that stage, so we're prepared to let councils like ours have a go at working together and see how we went. We're one of the few remaining ones that is still in existence. Unfortunately, New England fell apart a couple of years ago, and fundamentally I think in reflection that's partly to do with how they were operating and what their goals were in the first place, and who their partners were, which I'll talk to you about shortly. So as John said, collectively, and then in history, Central Tablelands Water, which is a water authority, joined in 2005. So collectively we've got 115,000 square kilometres, 450 employees in total. Central Tablelands Water has 19 employees, and it has a whole governance structure and internal resources and systems that are in place just to support 19 employees. So you can imagine the benefits that they get out of joining this, particularly when you think that geographically they're located across the street from Blayney Council Administration Building. And they have arrangements in place with Blayney that are just, they get wonderful benefits. Their IT infrastructure is all supported at Blayney Council. They share HR support from Blayney Council on a fee-for-service basis, so they're getting immense benefit from being in the alliance. The largest council is Cabonne, 220. So they're all sort of very similar in demographic and also very similar in the challenges that were facing them. The other thing that they were intent on was staying outside of the large regional councils. So bounding next to those councils are two very large inland cities of Orange and Bathurst, and the communities in those smaller areas are hell-bent on being amalgamated into the larger communities. So they've joined force, I suppose, if you like, to avoid getting sucked into the larger city councils where they don't think that they would have the voice that they have as a rural and regional centre. So that was what I was meaning about the New England Alliance too, about choosing your partners well. In the New England Alliance example, it was Armidale, which was a very large city council, and then 4 small councils that were surrounding it. The reviews into the reasons why NESAC wasn't successful long term, they talked a lot about when they got together to talk to each other, there was always an elephant in the room, and it was Armidale. The perception of the smaller councils that really it was just a way for Armidale to eventually take them over. So choose your partners carefully, I suppose. Safe to say when they first joined, like any change process, they had some really good quick wins, but they were probably clutching at things to do together. They were very enthusiastic, no less. But when I came on board in 2008, We took some time to reflect on why the Alliance was working and where we could improve. And when he actually sat back and reflected on how it was operating, we developed what we call now the core principles for successful collaboration. And they're pretty simple stuff. But when we looked at the areas that we had to pay attention to as an alliance, about how we can keep together working as an alliance, they were around these 4 things of communication, opportunity and order, resources and enthusiasm. We threw ourselves in the ring for the National Awards in 2009 and we won them, which was nice, recognising this framework. So I'll take you through them, and in the context of a road trip. So communication, you obviously don't start off going on a journey, oh God, I've said it, without having the right sort of communication in place. So fundamentally, this is what, how, when and who you talk to. As John said earlier, fundamentally we are based around relationships. We are only a voluntary cooperative model. There's nothing that legally binds us together. So we can walk away from the partnership at any point. And sometimes they do. When we're doing joint projects, if one of the councillors doesn't want to join in, by agreement they can just opt out of it. But because there's nothing legally binding us together, what binds us together is a common goal and the relationships that we have. So really important that we pay attention to how we communicate. So we do things like, and as I said, this is very practically based, newsletters, emails, annual reports. We actually do an annual report on the Alliance. I think that's really good for not only the member councils but also to the state government to show what we've achieved in the previous 12 months, and it's like a running record of what we've done over the last few years. We do make sure that we go back to the individual councils twice a year. I present to the council meetings, but I also do a monthly report back to the council meetings so that the Alliance stays relevant and is talked about. Do I keep losing it? I keep bumping it. We use different communication methods because we're geographically dispersed, and one of the fundamental reasons the way we work is to actually have joint projects going on. We have to get people together, and sometimes that can be quite hard if you're asking people to travel distance. So we use web conferencing, we use teleconferencing a lot. We also do face-to-face off-site, and we also change venues so that there's not one dominant council all the time holding the meetings. Otherwise people start thinking they're in charge, whereas no one's in charge, we're collectively in charge. So we share it round, the same as we do when we're allocating the leadership and project management roles for different projects. I scan around and see who's got the best capacity and who's got the best, most amount of time at that given time. So we also share that leadership of projects around as well. What else do we do? Networking, again based in the relationship aspect of how we operate. It's really important that our staff feel comfortable with the staff in their neighbouring councils. And over time, it's amazing to have seen the way that our distinct functional groups and functional managers now have like their own little networking group within the Alliance. And more often than not, I now hear of managers ringing their colleagues in the other councils before they'll start doing something new. So if they need a policy done or if there's a new task underway that they all have to do, they don't need to be prompted anymore. They'll just start ringing each other and say, have you done it? And if none of them have done it, they'll actually give it to me and we'll do it collectively. So we'll work out who's got the most capacity to do it and then we'll share it. We have an annual forum with our staff. Last year we actually had staff and councillors together, which I think was really useful. As I said about the project meetings, sharing it around and connecting work teams together. One of the decision-making avenues for the Alliance is that we have what's called our professional teams. So the GMs and the directors come together every 2 months for a half a day, and we talk only about Alliance activities and the joint projects that are underway. So it forces them to come together, although I think they actually like it now. But it was initially a way of getting them to, make sure that the Alliance was seen as some value. And on top of that, then we also have our board, which I'll talk about shortly. And where we can, we do shared training. So again, we're getting staff at all levels engaged with each other so that they make those connections and those networks. So, opportunity on order. This is sort of loosely around the structure, the processes and the governance, but also the chances to explore. you've got to give people the opportunity to actually be engaged within collaborative projects and activities, otherwise the whole alliance concept is false. If you haven't got people at all levels being considerate of how they might help each other out across the boundaries, you know, there's no point in being in the alliance together. So opportunity and order is about the staff involvement in the projects. So if we start a joint project, the directors fundamentally know that they've got to, you know, I'll get the approval for someone from their team to be in a project, and then they release them to come and work on those projects as time requires. The build it and they will come, you know, simple stuff, but, you know, look after people and nurture the relationships, bring them together, give them a nice lunch, you know, really get that communication going and that sense of team across what used to be quite siloed boundaries. And certainly in our case, identify areas of expertise and exploit them. We might have one planner out of the 3 councils, and a couple of years ago that's exactly the situation we found ourselves in. Due to staff leaving and so forth, we were down to one planner. They were able to help the other councils, and as a result of that we actually engaged a permanent shared planning position. But certainly there's areas within the councils that, particularly the smaller councils who don't have enough resources to have a full-time economic development officer or a full-time tourism officer or so forth, we exploit the expertise in one area and take it to the others. The order part of it is about having some structure. The governance of the alliance works such that we are, as I said, we're a voluntary model, but we have a memorandum of understanding which was originally developed when they came together in 2003. It's been reviewed a couple of times, and interestingly it still stays relevant to this day. We've got a set of goals, a set of principles about how we operate. The decision-making process is that we have a board. The board is the general managers and the mayors and deputy mayors of the member councils, and the board meets every 2 months as well. We were talking earlier, one of the presenters was talking about having strategic conversations. In the last 12 months, we've introduced a workshop concept to those board meetings so that we have the leaders of our 4 councils sitting in a room together, and we, you know, we'll have a conversation. In our last one, which went for 2.5 hours, was what is shared services and how could we implement it in our region in a more formalised structure. So we're giving that opportunity to our leaders to actually come together and talk to each other. And that really has helped us as one of our success factors is the level of trust that we have amongst our councils now, and thankfully we've had a bit of continuity in our leadership as well. So some of the mayors have been around since the very beginning, and some of our general managers, although I'm down to the last one, has been there since the beginning as well. Processing is a little bit mucky. It's not an ideal situation to take us forward, and one of the things we're looking at now is the fact that we are voluntary. I'll give you an example. I'm employed by all of them. They all pay for me. I'm host council. My host council employer is Cabon. So for day-to-day leave applications and so forth, I go to the general manager at Cabon. The secretariat of the alliance changes every 12 months around the general managers. So for day-to-day direction on alliance activities, I go to the secretariat. It's not ideal, and really got to work on your relationships. However, for now it's working, and it has worked for us. It's certainly not a model we don't think that could carry us into a more formalised structure around shared services if we were to go into significant co-engagement of staff or the major joint purchasing of assets, because we would need to be a legal entity to try and get rid of some of that messiness. But the messiness works for now, and it's not that messy. I've just got to stay on top of it all. We absolutely project manage everything that we do, so at any one time at the moment I think I've got 16 joint projects going, and I make them all work to project management principles. We scope it at the beginning. It has to be relevant, it has to be timely, and it can't drift. We've got one project at the moment that's just drifted and everyone's losing faith in the whole process. So absolutely got to be project managed, and the accountability for that then, as I said earlier, is shared around directors. So we have a project leader for all the projects. So ultimately that project leader, who is one of the directors, has accountability to make sure that project gets finished. So usually they don't get terribly involved on a day-to-day activity with the projects, but if I need the whip cracking, that's who I'll go to, and they'll rally the troops, and because fundamentally they're responsible for getting it finished. How am I going for time? I'll keep going. Okay, resources and relationship, the R of core, the stuff you need and who you're travelling with. So there's a lot of, I can't enhance to you enough about the importance of the relationship component. And as John was saying earlier, I think one of the reasons we've sustained over nearly 10 years is that it's been a gradual development of the alliance. We haven't bitten off anything that was going to tear us apart from the beginning. We did small stuff at the beginning and we've done valuable things, but we haven't done anything that was so contentious that it was likely to break the relationship. We're going to have to start thinking about that in the future, but hopefully the relationships are now strong and they trust each other. So a lot of that, you know, and if you were thinking about going into collaborations yourself, that's one of the things I'd really recommend that you spend those first initial moments of getting together as an alliance or a partnership is actually working out the rules about how you're going to work together and the niceties about working together. John asked me in my presentation today to talk about what you do around, I've got it there as my last dot point, the protection of their own patch. From time to time, I think in the early days there was a bit of cynicism that, well, it was an amalgamation by stealth anyway. You know, the more we do these things together, the more it'll just be easy to amalgamate us later on. You manage that and you manage the egos that come in and out of it from time to time. But fundamentally, the values of the alliance are about trust and relationship and ultimately about, you know, a good outcome for all. So, but that takes a bit of work. The resources. You do need money to do things, you do need people and time. Up until, from 2003 to 2008, there was no dedicated resources to the Alliance. It was all done on the goodwill and the hard work of directors and general managers taking on the extra work that was involved in the Alliance. And the extra work of the Alliance really is just that coordination role of getting things done, following up on things, project managing, blah, blah, blah. So they created my position in 2008 after they did a major review of it, and they all said they still wanted the Alliance, but that they knew that they needed to put some resources to it. So my position is wholly dedicated to the Alliance. My focus is absolutely on the Alliance. I'm not a Bon employee, I'm only that by name. I work in each of the councils. 2 days at Blaney, 2 days at Wellington, so I share myself around. So I'm actually physically in their council buildings, knowing the people, knowing the staff. They know what the Alliance is. So it's that presence that you need around that shared resource. And the onus then on me is to continue to make sure that the money they're investing in this position is then valuable back to the Alliance. And one of the things we report on in the management, in our annual report, is we try and calculate our savings in dollar terms, which can be a bit hard sometimes, but once we've calculated our savings for the year, they then take my costs out so that you can see a net value of the Alliance with me out of the situation. So I think probably whilst I think I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. There's certainly no doubt that you do need some dedicated resources if you want to take on a reasonable amount of work. And if you want to do things collaboratively like joint projects or joint purchasing or what have you, you do need someone who takes responsibility for coordinating those activities. So enthusiasm, I don't like that. I haven't seen anyone in local government jump that high for a long time. But anyway, it's probably from an American website. The enthusiasm component of it, the E of the core principles, is about the leadership and the common direction and absolutely knowing your way. Because on any road trip, you've got to know which direction you're going. And that fundamentally, from the Alliance perspective, comes from our board. We get strong leadership from our board. As I said, we have time to reflect. We don't navel gaze too much, but we do make sure that we do spend time making sure that it's still a relevant model and still valuable to our individual councils. So that leadership around the Alliance comes from them, but also, as I said, our directors and managers. Certainly a willingness to work together at all levels, and as I said earlier, our staff now know each other through working together on projects, and they're happy to work with each other. You've got to have some real demonstrated outcomes. You know, there's got to be some real evidence that it's working. So again, that promotion of what you're doing, reporting on the activities that you've done, you know, highlighting the achievements that you've made. And, you know, one of the other quirky things we do just to keep people engaged is at the annual forum each year we have an award for a project, and the projects get to nominate themselves, and the staff get to stand up in front of everybody, and we give them a $200 gift voucher for each one of them on the team, and we give them a stupid little trophy, and it sits proudly on their shelf, and that's the Alliance Challenge winner for the year. You know, just some sort of recognition that fundamentally it's the staff that make these things happen. We do have a management plan, as I said. We have a 3-year management plan. Currently we have 5 key priority areas, which is IT, integrated planning and reporting, environmental sustainability and climate change, human resources, and I've forgotten the 5th, procurement and purchasing. As I said, we promote activities, and we do have some dedicated resources, such as my position. So what have we achieved? As I said, 9 years as an alliance, which is pretty amazing. $4.2 million in savings. I counted them up before I came down, 55 collaborative projects over that time that have been completed, and we have 14 underway at the moment. We've applied for, one of the real bonuses is actually collectively applying for money. Not that there's much money around anywhere at the state or federal level, but when there was, we were quite successful, and we've, in the time that I've been there, we've had $420,000 worth of funding across a range of things that we got collectively. And I do firmly believe that one of the reasons we got it was because they got their best bang for their buck. They got 4 councils involved in something for not that much money when you shared it around. Just list off some of our particular projects, if you're interested. Last year we went to joint tender and purchase of IT corporate software for the 4 councils. It was competitive. The vendors, as you know, in local government, there's not that many software providers. So they got quite competitive with each other, because in our tender we said to them, and give us a price for individual purchase and then give us a price for collective purchase. So by the time we got to the preferred provider and we started negotiations, we got significant discounts for purchasing collectively. There was one tender process, so there was one set of legal fees, so there was one set of everything instead of 4 sets of it. So all up about $420,000 in savings. And some of it direct savings, you know, money that they had in their budgets when they thought their system was going to cost X, that it only cost Y, so that was money that went straight back into their budget. As I said, we've got the grant funding over the years. Integrated planning and reporting for New South Wales was big in this last 12 months. And we did that collectively, even though they had to individually develop their own plans. We engaged a common consultant, so then the process for engaging with our communities was the same. And one of the real benefits that we see from that now is that we're going to take all of the common future directions and actions from the individual plans and develop an alliance plan, which sort of gives us that regional plan that will be really beneficial for us, again, if we're going after grant funding for a particular thing that affects the region as opposed to an individual council. But it also focuses on what we can do collectively instead of individually. We've done asset planning together, about $90,000 worth of savings there by the guys working together. We have common engineering guidelines. The other thing we try and do as much as possible is have common, because we all have common boundaries. The farmer who's got a farm that bounds across both local government areas doesn't want to have to be treated differently under different guidelines or practices just because half his land is in one council and the other half is in the other. So where possible we have standard or common documentation. So we have common engineering guidelines now, standard conditions of consent. We're just finishing off a standard development control plans. We've done joint plant purchasing, not as much as we'd like to, and we've just started a major new project which I think will be one of the focuses or one of the options around shared services in the future, around the centralisation and use of our plant. You know, I started doing some figures the other day, and we've got nearly $25 million worth of assets sitting in our sheds around collectively. Sometimes that's gainfully being used, and other times it's sitting idle. So there's a whole a lot of work we want to do around how we're using our plant and how we're purchasing our plant. We have a mates rates system for use of plant. So if the guys in Cabon, because Cabon's the richest and Cabon's got the most, but they're very giving, so they will lease out or lend equipment, and it's just done at a mates rates. So they're not making money out of it. They work out what it costs and then they put a 10% administrative fee on top of it just for managing the work that's associated with it, and then they hand over the equipment. Which we also do on boundaries in sort of remote boundaries further away from the depot. Sometimes, the roads are actually closer to the depot of one of our neighbours, so on agreement we'll get the neighbours' gangs to go and do the maintenance work on that. And so you're not moving plant and equipment and people all over the place when you can actually get them there easier by using your neighbours. We do a lot of joint training, as I said. So where next? I better hurry up. We are seriously looking at shared services. We did some major research with ACELG last year and had some grant funding to look at shared services in local government. In New South Wales at the moment it's very difficult to do shared services because the Act prohibits us from forming corporations. We would need to have a legal entity around a shared service arrangement if we were to do some of the things we're considering doing. We can't make much decision at the moment. We're in an election year and really fundamentally, and the other thing layering over New South Wales at the moment is the new state government's reform agenda of Destination 2036, which has clear intent for major reform for New South Wales. We say it's very cyclical in local government, isn't it? If you've been around for a while, it's just, the next level of reform. But this one I think actually is a bit serious. I think this time there will be major change, and from the independent review panel that's been established are saying things like this won't be tinkering around the edges, this will be major change, but are very much saying it won't be necessarily about amalgamation. And for rural and regional councils, I was in state government before and I was part of a shared service arrangement in a state government authority. And the research that I've done and the time that I've now been with this alliance, shared services for rural and regional councils is an absolute, I won't say winner, but it really is something we should be looking at. We find it hard to attract people and keep them there. We've got isolation of professionals. If we were able to come up with a model where we've got that collective serving the greater many, I think it would be outstanding. I've done work for regional councils out in Burke and Central Darling, and they're in the middle of nowhere. They can't offer good wages. How do you get people to go there and work there? If you offer good money and if you've got a centre of excellence and you're actually growing employment and you're actually expanding the services that you offer your communities, it's got to be some alternative that we should be looking at. As I said, we need to look at our governance model because we can't move to shared services without it. And we are now currently implementing our new upgraded IT systems, which is actually a really good enabler for us for the future, because one of the things that stopped us from sharing processes before was that they all worked on different IT systems. So through the implementation of a common IT system, it's actually forcing same business processing, so they're processing creditors the same way in Blaney as they are in Cabon. So there shouldn't be much to stop you from actually opening up if you choose to and do that together. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be sitting together. You can actually do it across geography. So that's a great enabler. As I said, Destination 2036 in New South Wales, and I think I've covered a lot of this. The things we're looking at is, does the voluntary cooperative model carry us through? And I don't think it will. Do we need corporatisation and is shared services or shared administration as a solution? And how does the Alliance support the sustainability of individual member councils? So there's some of the questions that we're pondering at the moment. So my top tips for a successful road trip. Give time and consideration to the core principles that I outlined. Think about how you're going to communicate with each other. Think about the order and structure that you would need to support collaboration. Think about the resources and the relationships. Pick your partners well. and you do have to have an absolute level of enthusiasm and commitment to the concept before you go into it, and then once you're in it, because otherwise it will just fail. Pick your partners carefully, and don't be afraid to ask for directions if you get lost. I think sometimes we might think asking the dumb question is showing that we actually haven't got it worked out what we want to do, but sometimes asking the dumb questions or asking for help is actually helping you define what you want your future to be anyway. And I said, and to finalise, don't forget to celebrate along the way. Acknowledge the efforts and achievements that you do get, and have a drink at the end of the road trip, like you all will have an opportunity to go and do now that I can shut up and hop off the stage. And I wish you all the very best of luck if you're going to go into collaborations. I will end on something that Chris, the previous speaker, had highlighted on his last slide when he said regional collaborations offer significant opportunity. They absolutely do. So thank you very much.
Any questions for Donna, please? At the back there, David.
Just a quick one. Donna, what was the population of the three areas?
Total population, yeah. Just shy of 60. Ratepayers?
Yep.
Just shy of 60,000.
60,000, okay. And my second question is, would you think it would be a pattern for a partial or full amalgamation in the future? The state government, I'm sure, would look at it as, okay, you're halfway there, let's boot you on for the next half.
Yeah, well, that's one of the risks I think people have always been worried about. The more we work together, isn't it easier just to call us one? I still think that there's a desire in our communities, and fundamentally that's what will guide us, for them to still have local democratic representation. Whether that looks the same as it does now in the future, I don't know, but that's certainly still one of the fundamental principles that they want us to abide by.
Thank you, Eva Rozika from Hobart City Council. My other hat is as a uni student, and I looked at the shared services models between two sets of southern councils. To reiterate what you were saying, the group that was Tasman, Sorell and Glamorgan Spring Bay, it fell apart. The mayors changed over at a rate of knots and the general managers up and left. The group between Brighton, Southern Midlands, Central Highlands and Derwent Valley are much like you. They all collaborated for an outcome, even though some of the partners might have been disadvantaged or it didn't have a direct impact on them. For example, the Brighton Industrial Hub didn't affect Central Highlands. But the mayors have stayed the same, the general managers have hardly changed over, and it's one of the strongest little funding alliances that stumps up to the senators in the room and says, look at what we're achieving here, mate. So all strength to you. I think there's a model there. I went out as a student to say, why the hell don't you lot just go and amalgamate, for goodness sake? And I came back with the tail between my legs, being an urban elected member. Community identity and democratic representation at that level was phenomenal, and the strength of that kept them through very hard times. It also enabled them to, knowing each other, to have the trust and build the collaborative relationships. So I think there's a lot to be said for your model.
Thank you. You're right about the rural. I think that's a fundamental difference. And you know, not that I've worked in a metro council. All my professional work in all of my time has been in rural and regional New South Wales. But I do think that there is the small communities in small country towns have a different idea of what a council is and what they want them to do for them than perhaps it does in the metro areas.
Any other questions? Can we please thank Donna Galvin again?